Let's talk some Europe just to start. We got Europe printing about 100,000 COVID cases a day. Got some new lockdowns in London and France. Starting to see the street trim some numbers for Q4. How concerned are you about this new wave?
Well, I think it's spreading across the whole of Europe. So it does look as though the strong momentum, in fact, very V-like momentum that was occurring through the third quarter is certainly going to be at a minimum easing. And unless they can think of something to get these infections under control, it might become worse. So it is, after all the optimism a few weeks ago, it's starting to look a bit more concerning in Europe, that's for sure.
Part of the optimism, to the degree there is any in the States, is twofold. One, it's Europe, it's not us. And two, if it were to come to us, this wave, we would not be doing the lockdowns that we saw in the spring. Do you think there's holes in either one of those two narratives?
You know, what I sit around for at least a few minutes every day pondering is how come the US and Europe have these repeated escalations? And by the way, it looks to me from the US data that the caseload is picking up. And yet in vast swathes of Asia, particularly Northern Asia, that are going through the same weather change is because it's the same broad climate as ours, they seem to be managing it so much better, and it's quite concerning. And you know, from a big picture perspective, I think it simply adds at the margin to the notion that's been around for the past few years that maybe this is indeed the century of Asia, because so many different Asian countries are handling this so much better than Europe and the United States, in my view.
So then what do you think are the implications, the consequences of that? A bigger K in this K-shaped recovery here, markets go one direction, Main Street, small business, the middle class goes another. And does that have political implications, policy implications that investors should be thinking about?
I think there's all those kind of issues. Let me just quickly add, before I go too far down the pessimistic path for somebody that often tries to be quite optimistic about life. As you touched on in your headlines, I do think we're getting close to where perhaps 2 or 3 vaccines are going to get through or we're certainly going to get to the end of stage 3 results. And according to my best information, for what it's worth, they look quite promising. So I think personally, this is more of a fourth quarter issue, and that come Q1, in many parts of the West, including the ones that have struggled the most, the UK and the US, we may be having vaccines distributed and being injected in people to give us some immunity. And if that's the case, then I still sort of believe in the first half of next year, it's not impossible to think we could have some kind of economic boom. But I do think we've got a pretty challenging period before that. And God forbid, if all those stage 3 trials turn out to be negative, then it's going to be a lot worse. But meanwhile, as I've already said, the Asians seem to be kind of coping with it. Yeah. I marvel at some of the stories about the holiday week in China, how so many people seem to be kind of living normal lives, despite the fact that that's where it started.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.